I'm curious, playing these games where you're playing the same opponent back to back, what's the biggest difficulty with game planning and trying to figure all those things out?
I think just trying to find a balance, between if there's things you feel you can adjust, and do better, and then without a lot of time to do that, just what you're capable of executing on. And sometimes feeling like, are you, because it's, back-to-back or, the same opponent in a couple days, you don't want to try to reinvent the wheel, particularly in the regular season.
Hey, Coach. Just talk about Onyeka for a moment. The big game he had on Thursday night in Game 1 of this 2-game series, and how hopefully he can duplicate that maybe tonight.
Yeah, I think, not just tonight and the previous game, but really over the course of several games, and weeks and months, I think you've seen him begin to find some of his identity as a player even more. His ability to pass. I think you finding cutters. I think he's getting more and more comfortable, shooting the ball from three. In fact, one of the biggest things last game was, getting to the line and making big free throws. So, additionally, he's just been put in other situations because of different matchups. He guarded Siakam last game. He'll do some of that. He may not do it the whole game, but during those situations that are unique, and sometimes you have to be in those and fail in order to improve. And I think we've seen him being able to embrace things and try to get better.
Coach, going back to the concept of playing opponents back to back, or the same opponent back to back, how much does it maybe mimic in some ways like a playoff series down the line for guys like Zach or Dyson who don't have a lot of playoff experience?
I think that's kind of I think that it's easy to go there. The playoffs are just different, but it's certainly different than, playing Indiana and then Orlando. It's always difficult if you look in a playoff situation to beat a team twice in a row. So there are certainly similarities. One of those things maybe you can draw on later. From a coaching standpoint, I don't know that you necessarily want to say, hey, this is going to simulate the playoffs, although there's allusions to that at various times. As teams prepare differently and adjust, that some of those things, even if you don't talk about them, they happen.
Hey, Coach. Dyson's gotten a lot of respect this season for the defense and the disruption. But I think an unappreciated part of his game is how little he fouls and how he's rarely ever, if at all, in foul trouble. He's always composed, always remains disciplined. Could you speak a little bit to how he remains disciplined against the toughest matchups in the NBA on a night-to-night basis?
Yeah, I think it goes to his anticipation. And he doesn't put himself in positions where he's, making high-risk plays. I think he does a great job, frankly, of showing his hands. He's not swiping and putting himself in positions, as you mentioned, where it looks like he's fouling. I think he's very disciplined as far as his body position.
Just piggybacking on Dyson, Rick Carlisle last game told me that the Hall of Fame has taken note of people who play defense. Do you think that Dyson is changing the criteria for what it takes to be Defensive Player of the Year, maybe making it cool again to play defense?
Well, it depends who you ask. I don't know if the defense has ever gone out of fashion. There's a lot of cool guys out there that play defense. Bill Russell was pretty cool. But I understand what you're saying. I think for a perimeter player, it's more difficult analytically to gauge their impact. You have something like steals, the same way you do block shots. The deterrence at the rim is something that's quantifiable. And I think it's easier to see, a big rim protector, impacting field goal percentage. A lot of what Dyson and perimeter players are able to do defensively, they're disruptive in ways that have, more indirect impact on a possession throughout the possession, whether it's making it harder for someone to get a ball, or spacing changes. You know, same situation, you know, teams get up against the shot clock, you know, but a lot of those things are much more difficult, you know, to capture objectively. And I think that's one of the reasons that it's easier to notice, you know, rim protection and big, and that's not to diminish. You know, I had Rudy Gobert, and he's impactful, and he was defensive player of the year. This is a different way to impact a defense. You know, you have someone like Dyson, you know, it mitigates on some level if you don't have rim protection, because he's able to keep people out of situations where they can attack the rim. So I would agree with Rick, you know, and it's something, and I would agree with you too, as far as, you know, I don't know, I'd like for it to still be cool. I think most coaches you ask would say it's pretty cool, but we don't, you know, go back to the box score, you know, block shots and steals. You can't capture those things. And you see defensive rating, and you see on-off numbers. Those things are a little harder to really appreciate and value.
Points in the paint were obviously big on Thursday. You're third in that category this season compared to 15th last year. Was that an off-season objective or mandate to get more points in the paint, and how do you view that angle for tonight's game?
I think there's been a focus on getting into the paint. Whether that translates into actually points in the paint, or oftentimes there's a big emphasis for us on getting in there and then having our eyes out. When teams take away the three, you know, we like to talk about the rim revealing itself, but sometimes you get in there and you take tough contested twos, and your times you're in the paint may not always result in, you know, the productivity you want. So that's something we try to focus on, even when you get in the paint. You know, you're making, you know, a high percentage read, but I think the biggest thing for us is just wanting to put pressure on the rim.